Have you ever closed your eyes and let yourself drift along a river, feeling as though time itself is carrying you gently forward? Tonight, on Mystic Bedtime Stories, we set sail on the Mekong, the lifeline of Southeast Asia, the eternal river that shaped kingdoms, whispered myths, and carried the dream of Angkor in its flow. Stay with me, because what you're about to hear is not just history, it is a lullaby of water and memory. The Mekong begins far away in the lonely peaks of Tibet, where glaciers sparkle beneath the sun. From there, it journeys more than 5,000 kilometers, cutting through deep valleys, tumbling in rapids, stretching into broad plains. It flows through 6 countries: China, Myanmar, Laos, Thailand, Cambodia, and Vietnam, before finally kissing the sea. But here in Cambodia, the Mekong changes. It softens, slows, spreads itself wide like an endless mirror of the sky. This is the river's heart, and it is here that the Khmer Empire would one day rise. At dawn, mist curls across the water like white silk drifting on the breeze. Fishermen in narrow boats push away from the banks, their oars dipping in unison. The water ripples softly, like the steady beat of a drum. Can you hear it? That rhythmic sound, steady and patient, is the very heartbeat of the land. The forests rise tall along the river's edge. Monkeys leap from branch to branch. Birds call to one another in the canopy. The air is warm and damp, heavy with the scent of lotus, wet earth, and wood smoke from cooking fires. The people who lived here thousands of years ago would have known these same smells, heard these same sounds. Nature has not changed. It remembers. Imagine, then, the first families who came to settle by these waters. Nomads once, they found here a land so rich that it seemed to breathe abundance. Each year, the Mekong flooded, spilling over its banks, laying down silt so dark and fertile that rice could grow in fields that seemed endless. With rice came stability. With stability came stories. They built homes from wood and palm leaves. They planted their first rice paddies. They learned the rhythm of flood and retreat, of planting and harvest. And with each passing season, the river taught them lessons: patience, gratitude, and trust. Have you ever listened to a river long enough to feel it speaking, not in words, but in rhythm? That is how the Mekong spoke to them. But they were more than farmers. In the nights, when stars covered the sky like a silver net, they lay back and wondered about the heavens. They saw patterns in the stars, reflected in the water below. They told stories of gods and serpents, of spirits in the trees, of ancestors who watched from the sky. They began to weave myth into their world until every ripple of the river seemed alive with meaning. The Mekong has always had its secrets. The people believed Naga, great serpents of the deep, lived within its waters. On certain nights, when the moon was high, villagers swore they saw glowing fireballs rise silently from the river's surface and drift into the sky. Even today, this mystery lives on. Locals still gather along the Mekong to watch what they call the Naga fireballs, glowing orbs that rise without sound or trace. Can you picture it? A still night, the water dark and calm. Then suddenly, spheres of light rising like lanterns, floating upward until they vanish among the stars. To those first settlers, this was proof that the river was sacred. The Naga were alive, watching, perhaps guiding their destiny. And perhaps it is no coincidence that centuries later, the Khmer kings would call themselves sons of the Naga, claiming divine right through this ancient myth. The seeds of empire were already hidden in these early stories. Picture the river at dusk, the sky painted in crimson and gold, children laughing as they chase each other along the banks, a mother weaving mats beneath a palm tree, priests chanting under simple wooden shrines, their voices rising and falling like the flow of the water. The hum of cicadas grows louder as night falls, until it feels as though the very earth itself is whispering. Have you ever stood in such a sound, where the chorus of insects is so full that silence feels impossible? For the people of the Mekong, this sound was the lullaby of life. By the glow of firelight, they told stories. One elder might speak of a hunter who met a Naga bride. Another might tell of a god who descended on a beam of sunlight and taught the people to grow rice. These weren't just tales. They were lessons, warnings, and memories wrapped in wonder. Life along the Mekong was simple, but it was never small. Villages traded fish for salt, rice for pottery, honey for woven cloth. Travelers came and went, carrying news from distant lands. Boats glided downstream toward the sea, carrying more than goods. They carried ideas. Slowly, through this river, the Khmer world was learning to connect with the wider world. And yet, in the quiet moments, the people still turned to the river as their guide. The Mekong was constant. It flooded, it receded, it gave, it took away, but it always returned. It became, for them, not just water, but time itself, flowing, steady, eternal. Now take a deep breath. Inhale, as though you are standing by the river's edge, the scent of lotus blossoms rising with the mist. Exhale, as though you are letting go of the weight of the present, sinking instead into the gentle current of the past. You are no longer here in the modern world. You are drifting back, thousands of years, to a place where every sound was new, every shadow alive with spirit. Stay with me, because what comes next will turn these quiet villages into something greater. Funan, Chenla, kingdoms that will rise from these riverside roots and prepare the way for Angkor. The Mekong is not only water, it is prophecy. Numbers, too, can tell a story. Nearly 60 million people still depend on the Mekong today. For more than 19 centuries, this river has been a highway of trade, connecting India and China through Southeast Asia. Think of that. 19 centuries of boats, of voices, of goods carried back and forth, each leaving a trace, like ripples across time. The people here might not have known the word empire yet, but in the silence of the river, in the glow of fireballs, in the whispers of the forest, the idea of greatness was already forming. Have you ever visited a river that felt alive, as though it were watching you as much as you watched it? Perhaps you've stood by waters that seemed to breathe, to remember. If so, then you already understand the Mekong. And so, Chapter 1 closes with the river itself, flowing endlessly, carrying myths upon its waves, holding secrets in its depths. In the next chapter, we will step into the world of Funan and Chenla, where trade, power, and the first sparks of empire will appear. What happens next will reveal that Angkor Wat was not a beginning, but the flowering of a dream planted long before. If this journey soothed you, if it painted pictures in your mind, stay with mystic bedtime stories. Share this tale with someone who loves history, and join me again as we continue sailing down the river of time. Because here, history is not only remembered, it is dreamed. The river does not rush, it remembers. As we drift deeper into the ancient waters of Southeast Asia, a question whispers in the wind. What if I told you that the greatest temple in the world was built on the bones of forgotten kingdoms? Tonight, we venture into the shadows of history to uncover the mysterious realms that came before Angkor. These aren't just forgotten names in dusty scrolls. They are the beating hearts that would one day pump life into the greatest empire Asia has ever known. Close your eyes, and let me paint you a picture of a world lost to time. Picture yourself standing on the deck of an ancient merchant ship. The year is 200 AD. Before you stretches the mighty Mekong Delta. But this isn't the quiet backwater you might imagine. No, this is the beating heart of Southeast Asian trade, where gold and spices flow like rivers of liquid wealth. This is the kingdom of Funan, and what's truly incredible, most people have never even heard its name, yet without Funan there would be no Angkor Wat. Don't scroll past this, because I'm about to reveal why Funan was called the Land of Gold by Chinese chroniclers, and how this ancient kingdom pioneered the secrets that would later create Angkor's magnificence. Funan wasn't just a kingdom, it was a revelation. Imagine a civilization that understood something the rest of the world had forgotten, that water doesn't just flow, it connects. It brings people together. It carries ideas, dreams, and destinies across vast distances. The rulers of Funan looked at the endless maze of rivers and saw something extraordinary. A natural highway system more efficient than any road ever built. They transformed the Mekong Delta into the Singapore of the ancient world. Can you picture it? Merchant ships from India, China, and the Malay kingdoms, all converging on Funan's golden ports, the air thick with incense and spices, the harbors glittering with treasures from across the known world. But here's what 95% of historians miss about Funan. They weren't just traders. They were master engineers who first discovered the secret that would later build Angkor Wat, the marriage of water and stone. Stay tuned, because what I'm about to tell you about Funan's mysterious disappearance will send chills down your spine. In the heart of Funan, something magical was happening. Hindu priests from India brought more than just religion. They brought the cosmic blueprint. They taught the Funanese kings something profound, that earthly kingdoms should mirror the heavens above. This is where it all began. The idea that a temple isn't just a building, but a scale model of Mount Meru, the cosmic mountain at the center of the universe. The concept that would one day bloom into Angkor Wat's perfect symmetry. But empires, like flowers, have their seasons. And as Funan reached its golden zenith, dark clouds were gathering in the north. From the mountainous regions of what we now call Cambodia, a new power was rising. They called themselves the people of Chenla, and they had been watching Funan's wealth with hungry eyes. Here's the twist that changes everything. Chenla didn't destroy Funan through brutal conquest. No, they did something far more clever. They absorbed it. Like a river quietly changing course, they gradually took over Funan's trade routes, its technologies, its very soul. Keep listening, because the way Chenla transformed from a small mountain kingdom into an empire will reveal the secret blueprint that Angkor would later follow. The story of Chenla is the story of transformation itself. Imagine mountain warriors who looked down at the wealthy river plains and thought, why should we be satisfied with our small highland kingdoms when paradise lies below? But here's what makes Chenla extraordinary. They didn't just take over Funan's territory, they inherited its dreams. They adopted the Hindu-Buddhist cosmic vision. They embraced the sacred science of hydraulic engineering. They made Funan's knowledge their own. Under King Pavavarman I, Chenla began something unprecedented. They started building temple mountains. Not just temples, but artificial mountains crowned with stone sanctuaries. Each one a statement. We are the axis where earth meets heaven. This is where mystic bedtime stories reveals the hidden connections that most history books miss. Because every stone temple Chenla built was practice, preparation for the ultimate masterpiece that would one day become Angkor Wat. Can you feel it happening? The cosmic forces aligning, the ancient wisdom accumulating, the stage being set for something that would amaze the world for 1,000 years. But Chenla had a problem. Actually, they had several problems. And here's the fascinating part. These problems would teach them lessons that would later make Angkor virtually unconquerable. First lesson: unity is everything. Chenla split into two kingdoms, Upper Chenla in the mountains, Lower Chenla in the plains. Civil war weakened them both. The future Khmer emperors would remember this, and create an empire so centralized that it could withstand centuries of challenges. Second lesson: water is life, but water can also be death. Chenla struggled to master the complex hydraulics that Funan had perfected. Droughts brought famine. Floods brought destruction. But in struggling with these challenges, they learned something precious: how to truly control water on a massive scale. Don't close your eyes yet, because I'm about to reveal the mystical moment when Chenla's struggles would transform into Angkor's triumph. By the 8th century, Chenla was fracturing, multiple kingdoms claiming the ancient title, pirates from Java raiding their coasts. The glorious inheritance of Funan seemed to be slipping away like sand through fingers. But sometimes, in history's darkest moments, heroes are born. And from the chaos of collapsing Chenla, a prince would emerge who would change the world forever. His name was Jayavarman II, and what he would do next would echo through eternity. Picture this final scene. The year is 802 A.D. A young prince stands on the sacred mountain of Kulen, looking down at the fractured kingdoms below. In his mind, a vision is forming, not just of reunited Chenla, but of something far greater. An empire that would surpass both Funan and Chenla. An empire that would build monuments to rival the gods themselves. This is exactly why we at Mystic Bedtime Stories believe in the power of dreams. Because sometimes one person's dream becomes humanity's greatest achievement. If this story of forgotten kingdoms rising and falling like tides is resonating with your soul, leave a building in the comments below, because we're building our own kingdom here, a kingdom of dreamers and nighttime storytellers. And now, as the ghosts of Funan and Chenla fade back into the mists of time, let their whispered secrets carry you toward sleep. Let the image of ancient temple mountains rising from jungle mists, of merchant ships heavy with golden treasures, of kingdoms that lived and loved and dreamed before vanishing into legend, guide you into the most peaceful rest. In Chapter 3, we'll witness the moment that changed everything, when Jayavarman II performed the sacred ceremony that would birth the Khmer Empire and set the stage for Angkor Wat's creation. The mystical ritual that proclaimed him not just a king, but a god-king. Sweet dreams await in the shadow of temple spires. What if I told you that one sacred ritual performed on a mountaintop would create an empire that lasted longer than the Roman Empire itself? Welcome back, dear dreamers, to our journey through the mists of ancient Cambodia. Tonight, we witness the most pivotal moment in Southeast Asian history. A moment when a mortal prince transformed himself into a god-king and gave birth to a legend that would echo through 1,000 years. This is the story of Jayavarman II and the mystical ceremony that created not just an empire, but a cosmic order on Earth. Picture yourself in the year 802 AD, standing at the base of the sacred mountain Phnom Kulen. The morning mist clings to the ancient trees like the breath of sleeping spirits. Above you, carved into the living rock of the mountain, sacred symbols glisten with morning dew. This mountain isn't just stone and earth. It is the navel of the world, the axis where heaven touches the earth. And today, history will be rewritten forever. High above, on the mountain's peak, a young prince named Jayavarman II prepares for a ceremony unlike any the world has ever seen. He isn't just claiming a throne. He is declaring himself the earthly incarnation of the god Shiva. He is becoming what the Sanskrit texts call a Devaraja, a god-king whose authority flows directly from the cosmic order itself. But here's what 98% of people don't understand about this moment. Jayavarman II wasn't just performing a political stunt. He was establishing a spiritual principle that would guide the construction of every temple, every canal, every palace that would follow. He was creating the cosmic blueprint for Angkor Wat itself. Don't miss this next part, because I'm about to reveal the secret ritual that gave birth to the greatest architectural wonder in human history. The ceremony begins at dawn. Brahmin priests, masters of ancient Vedic knowledge, arrange themselves in precise patterns around the mountain summit. They carry with them sacred fires that have burned for generations, scrolls containing the cosmic mathematics of temple construction, and, most importantly, the spiritual technology to transform a human being into a living god. The air itself seems to vibrate with anticipation. Incense smoke spirals upward, carrying prayers to the celestial realms. The priests begin their chants, their voices weaving together in harmonies that seem to make the very stones of the mountain hum with power. And then the moment arrives. Jayavarman II steps forward into a mandala, a sacred geometric pattern that represents the entire universe in miniature. As he does so, something extraordinary happens. He is no longer just a prince seeking power. He is becoming the living embodiment of Mount Meru, the cosmic mountain at the center of all existence. Can you feel the energy shifting? Can you sense how this single moment is creating ripples that will spread across centuries? Here's the part that will give you chills. The priests don't just crown Jayavarman II as king. They perform a ritual called the Devaraja ceremony, binding his soul to the land itself. From this moment forward, he isn't ruling over Cambodia. He is Cambodia. The prosperity of the kingdom flows through his divine essence. The temples built in his honor aren't just monuments to his ego. They are cosmic machines designed to channel divine energy into the physical world. Stay with me, because what happens next explains why Angkor Wat looks the way it does, and why it was built where it was built. Once the ceremony is complete, Jayavarman II doesn't just return to his palace to enjoy his new status. No, he embarks on something far more ambitious. He begins what historians call his progress around the kingdom. But this isn't just a royal tour. It's a cosmic mapping expedition. Everywhere Jayavarman II travels, he performs smaller versions of the Kulin ceremony. He's not just claiming territory, he's sanctifying it. He's turning the entire landscape of Cambodia into a sacred mandala, a giant temple complex with himself at the cosmic center. This is where the genius of Khmer civilization reveals itself. Other empires conquered through force alone. The Khmer Empire conquered through sacred architecture. They didn't just defeat their enemies. They transformed the very land into a reflection of divine order. And here's the breathtaking part that most historians overlook. When Jayavarman II established his capital, he didn't choose the largest city or the richest port. He chose a location that perfectly aligned with the cosmic geometry he had established on Mount Kulen. He chose the site that would one day become Angkor. Keep listening, because I'm about to reveal why this location was so cosmically significant that it would inspire the construction of over 1,000 temples. The site that Jayavarman II selected sits at the intersection of several sacred rivers, creating natural hydraulic conditions perfect for massive irrigation projects. But more than that, it sits at the exact center of what the ancient texts describe as the navel of the earth. From this single point, the entire known world could be seen as a perfect mandala, radiating outward in sacred proportions. When you understand this cosmic vision, suddenly everything about Angkor Wat makes perfect sense. It isn't just a temple. It's a scale model of the universe itself, positioned at the exact spot where earthly and divine energies converge most powerfully. This is exactly why mystic bedtime stories focuses on these deeper meanings hidden within history. We believe that understanding the spiritual dimension of human achievement helps us sleep more peacefully and dream more beautifully. But Jayavarman II faced a challenge that would test his divine authority. The Javanese kingdom of Sailendra had been expanding northward, claiming tribute from the fractured Chenla kingdoms. They didn't recognize his cosmic authority. They saw him as just another upstart prince making grandiose claims. What happens next reveals the true genius of the Devaraja system and why it proved so effective at uniting the Khmer people. Instead of immediately declaring war, Jayavarman II did something brilliant. He began building, not just any buildings, but cosmic temples that demonstrated his divine connection so powerfully that resistance became spiritually impossible. Each temple was proof that the gods themselves endorsed his rule. The most stunning example was his temple pyramid at Mahendra Parvata. Built directly into the sacred mountain where his coronation took place, it wasn't just a royal monument. It was a cosmic antenna, channeling divine energy down from the heavens and out across the entire kingdom. When rival princes saw the mathematical perfection of these structures, when they witnessed the prosperity that flowed to regions under Jayavarman Vajrayaur's rule, when they experienced the spiritual power radiating from his temple complexes, resistance crumbled. Not through fear, but through recognition of authentic divine authority. By the time of his death in 850 A.D., Jayavarman II had accomplished something unprecedented. He had created not just an empire, but a cosmic order. He had established a template for sacred kingship that would guide his successors for over 600 years. Most importantly, he had chosen the sacred site and established the spiritual principles that would eventually give birth to Angkor Wat. As we drift toward sleep tonight, let the image of that mystical mountaintop ceremony fill your dreams. Picture the sacred fires burning against the dawn sky, the ancient chants echoing through misty forests, the moment when a mortal prince became a living god and set in motion the forces that would create the most beautiful temple complex the world has ever known. In Chapter 4, we'll explore how Jayavarman II's successors transformed his cosmic vision into concrete reality through the most sophisticated hydraulic engineering the ancient world had ever seen. We'll discover the secret of the berets and how the Khmer Empire literally moved mountains to create their earthly paradise. Let the sacred energies of Mount Kulen carry you into the most peaceful sleep, knowing that some dreams are so powerful they reshape the world itself. What if the secret to building the most magnificent temple in history wasn't stone or gold, but something as simple as water? Now, we uncover the engineering marvel that modern scientists are only now beginning to understand. A hydraulic system so sophisticated that it supported over 1 million people in the heart of the Cambodian jungle, making Angkor the largest pre-industrial city in the world. This is the story of how the Khmer transformed water from a natural force into divine architecture itself. Imagine yourself floating high above the Cambodian landscape in the year 1000 AD. Below, you stretches something that would seem impossible to ancient eyes. Perfectly rectangular lakes, each one larger than many modern cities, gleaming like mirrors under the tropical sun. Canals flowing in perfectly straight lines, defying the natural curves of the landscape. Rice fields arranged in geometric patterns that seem to stretch infinitely toward every horizon. This isn't just irrigation. This is the earth itself transformed into a cosmic mandala, a living reflection of divine order made manifest through human genius. The Khmer didn't just build temples. They rebuilt the very foundations of reality itself. But here's what 97% of people don't realize about the Khmer Empire's true source of power. While European kingdoms were struggling with famine and disease, the Khmer had solved the fundamental problem of civilization itself: how to make the desert bloom and ensure that abundance flows eternally. Don't scroll away now, because I'm about to reveal the engineering secret that NASA satellite imagery only discovered in the 1990s, hidden for 1,000 years beneath jungle canopy. The story begins with Jayavarman II's successors, who inherited not just his divine authority, but his cosmic vision of transforming Cambodia into an earthly paradise. Kings like Indravarman I and Yasovarman I looked at the seasonal floods and droughts that had plagued Southeast Asia for millennia and saw not obstacles, but opportunities. They asked themselves a question that would change everything. What if we could capture the monsoon itself and bend it to our divine will? The answer was the beret system. But these weren't just reservoirs. They were cosmic oceans, each one a scale model of the primordial waters that Hindu cosmology describes as the source of all creation. Picture the West Beret, stretching 8 kilometers from east to west and over 2 kilometers from north to south. Standing on its shores, you couldn't see the other side. It was like an inland sea, created entirely by human hands, holding enough water to supply a modern city for years. But here's the breathtaking part that reveals the true genius of Khmer hydraulic engineering. These berets weren't just storage tanks. They were the heart of an integrated water management system that covered thousands of square kilometers and operated with precision that wouldn't be matched again until the modern era. Stay with me, because what I'm about to describe will completely change how you understand human capability in the ancient world. The Khmer engineers didn't just dig holes and hope they would fill with rainwater. They created an interconnected network of canals, dikes, and spillways that captured monsoon rainwater from across the entire watershed and channeled it with mathematical precision to exactly where it was needed. During the rainy season, excess water flowed through carefully calculated channels into the berets. During the dry season, this stored water flowed back out through a different set of channels, providing controlled irrigation to rice fields across the empire. But the true masterpiece was the way they used elevation changes that were almost invisible to the naked eye. Across seemingly flat terrain, they detected great differences of just a few centimeters per kilometer and used these tiny variations to create water flows that could travel dozens of kilometers without any mechanical pumps or external energy source. Imagine water flowing uphill through human ingenuity alone. That's exactly what the Khmer achieved. Can you picture the transformation this created? Endless green rice paddies where there had once been scrubland, fish ponds teeming with protein to feed the growing population, lotus flowers blooming in sacred pools that reflected the temple spires rising above them. This abundance wasn't just material prosperity. It was spiritual proof of the God King's cosmic authority. The land itself bore witness to his divine nature through its supernatural fertility. Here's the connection that will give you chills. Every major temple in the Angkor complex was positioned not just for cosmic alignment with the stars, but for perfect integration with this hydraulic system. The moats around Angkor Wat weren't decorative. They were functional components of the empire's water management network. Keep listening, because I'm about to reveal how this engineering marvel made Angkor Wat's construction not just possible, but inevitable. The prosperity created by hydraulic mastery provided the economic foundation for the most ambitious architectural projects in human history. Surplus rice fed the thousands of stonemasons, sculptors, and laborers who would spend decades carving Angkor Wat from solid stone. Surplus wealth funded trade expeditions that brought sandstone from distant quarries and bronze from across Southeast Asia. But more than that, the psychological impact of transforming a jungle into paradise created a civilization-wide confidence that no architectural challenge was impossible. If they could move rivers and create lakes, why not build a temple that touched the sky itself? This is where the spiritual and practical dimensions of Khmer civilization merged into something greater than the sum of their parts. The berets weren't just water storage. They were ritual purification pools where pilgrims prepared themselves for temple ceremonies. The irrigation canals weren't just agricultural infrastructure. They were sacred rivers connecting every farm to the cosmic center at Angkor. Every drop of water in the empire flowed according to divine geometry, just as every stone in their temples aligned with celestial mathematics. At Mystic Bedtime Stories, we love these moments where practical engineering becomes indistinguishable from spiritual practice, because they remind us that our greatest achievements come when we align our technical skills with our highest aspirations. But this hydraulic paradise faced challenges that would test every aspect of Khmer ingenuity. Climate variations, population growth, and the constant need for maintenance created problems that required continuous innovation. The solution was typically brilliant. They developed a hydraulic bureaucracy as sophisticated as their engineering. Specialized officials monitored water levels, calculated distribution schedules, and coordinated maintenance across hundreds of kilometers of waterways. They created water courts where disputes over irrigation rights were settled, according to cosmic principles rather than mere politics. They established temple rituals specifically designed to ensure the spiritual health of their water systems, because they understood that the physical and metaphysical dimensions of reality are inseparably connected. By the height of the Khmer Empire in the 12th century, this hydraulic mastery supported over 1 million people in and around Angkor, making it larger than London would be for another 700 years. The system was so successful that it continued to function for centuries, supporting a population density that modern Cambodia has never matched. The rice surplus was so abundant that the Khmer could afford to dedicate enormous resources to purely spiritual pursuits. Thousands of people could spend their entire lives perfecting the art of stone carving, knowing that the land itself would provide for all their material needs. This abundance created a feedback loop of prosperity and spiritual development that reached its ultimate expression in Angkor Wat itself, a temple so magnificent that it required the coordinated effort of an entire civilization operating at the peak of its powers. As you drift toward sleep tonight, let the gentle sound of ancient water flowing through timeless channels carry your dreams. Picture vast lakes reflecting temple spires under tropical skies, endless rice fields swaying in warm breezes, and the quiet satisfaction of a civilization that learned to work in harmony with the rhythms of nature itself. In Chapter 5, we'll witness the culmination of all this preparation as King Suryavarman VII begins construction of the masterpiece that will make all their dreams eternal. Angkor Wat, the temple of Vishnu that captures the entire universe in stone. Sleep peacefully, knowing that when human ingenuity serves divine purpose, even water itself becomes sacred architecture. What if I told you that the most beautiful building ever created was designed not by human architects, but by cosmic mathematicians following a blueprint written in the stars themselves? Tonight, we witness the birth of Angkor Wat, a temple so perfect that it seems to have materialized from the realm of pure divine imagination into our physical world. This is the story of King Suryavarman VII and his impossible dream to build paradise itself in stone. Close your eyes and travel with me to the year 1113 A.D. The morning mist rises from the sacred berets as a young prince named Suryavarman ascends to the throne of the Khmer Empire. But this isn't just another royal coronation. This is the moment when human ambition aligns with cosmic destiny to create something that will outlive empires, outlive religions, outlive the very civilizations that built it. Suryavarman VII doesn't just want to build a temple. He wants to capture eternity itself and give it physical form. Picture him standing at the exact center of what will become Angkor Wat, his feet planted on ground that generations of hydraulic engineers have transformed into the perfect building site. The foundation beneath him is more than earth and stone. It is the accumulated dreams of an entire civilization, finally ready to reach toward the heavens. And here's what 96% of visitors to Angkor Wat never realize. What they're looking at isn't just architecture. It's a cosmic machine, a three-dimensional mandala designed to channel divine energy from the celestial realm into our earthly existence. Don't look away now, because I'm about to reveal the mathematical secret hidden in every measurement of Angkor Wat that proves its builders possessed knowledge that modern science is only beginning to rediscover. The temple complex covers 162.6 hectares, making it larger than many modern cities. But that size isn't arbitrary. When you calculate the precise measurements of every courtyard, every gallery, every tower, they conform to sacred mathematical ratios that mirror the cosmic cycles described in ancient Hindu astronomy. The central tower rises 65 meters above the ground, but its height corresponds exactly to the distance between Earth and the first celestial sphere in Khmer cosmology. The moat surrounding the complex is 190 meters wide, matching the precise distance that Vishnu travels across the cosmic ocean in one divine stride. Every single measurement is both architectural necessity and spiritual symbol simultaneously. But here's the part that will give you chills. The entire complex is oriented so perfectly that during the spring equinox, the sun rises directly over the central tower when viewed from the western causeway. On that morning, Angkor Wat becomes a cosmic sundial marking humanity's place in the eternal cycles of creation and destruction. Stay with me, because what I'm about to describe about the construction process will forever change how you think about human capability in the ancient world. Building Angkor Wat required moving approximately 300,000 tons of sandstone from quarries 40 kilometers away. In an age before mechanical cranes or motorized transport, this meant that human hands carved, transported, and precisely positioned every single block, using nothing but rope, wooden rollers, and the coordinated effort of thousands of workers. But this wasn't slave labor driven by brutal oppression. This was sacred work performed by craftsmen who understood they were participating in the most holy act possible, creating a dwelling place for Vishnu himself on earth. Imagine the scene at dawn each day. Thousands of stonemasons, sculptors, and laborers gathering at the construction site as morning prayers echo across the complex. Each worker knows that the stone they're carving today will carry their devotion forward through centuries. Each block they position is an offering to the cosmic order that sustains all existence. Can you feel the spiritual energy that must have pulsed through such a project? Can you sense how this shared vision transformed back-breaking labor into acts of worship? The sculptural program alone represents over 3,000 square meters of intricate relief carvings. Every surface tells stories from Hindu mythology, but these aren't just decorative illustrations. They're visual mantras, spiritual technologies designed to guide the mind through precise meditative states as visitors walk through the temple's galleries. Here's the breathtaking detail that reveals the true sophistication of Khmer artistic vision. The famous churning of the ocean of milk relief, stretching over 50 meters along the eastern gallery, isn't just telling a story. It's a visual representation of the cosmic process by which consciousness emerges from the primordial void. Every demon and god carved into that wall represents a different aspect of the psychological transformation that occurs during deep spiritual practice. Keep listening, because I'm about to reveal the hidden chamber deep within Angkor Wat that most tourists never see, and why it holds the key to understanding the temple's true purpose. At the heart of Angkor Wat, accessible only by climbing steep stone stairs that seem to ascend directly into the sky, lies the central sanctuary. This isn't just the temple's architectural center. It's the spiritual nucleus around which the entire cosmos revolves. Originally, this chamber housed a golden statue of Vishnu, but the statue was more than an idol. It was consecrated through rituals so powerful that it became, in the understanding of Khmer theology, the actual presence of Vishnu inhabiting physical form. The god wasn't just worshipped in this space. The god literally lived there. Standing in that chamber, a devotee wasn't just visiting a temple. They were standing at the exact center of the universe itself, in the presence of the divine consciousness that maintains all reality. This is exactly why mystic Bedtime stories is drawn to these profound spiritual achievements, because Angkor Wat reminds us that when human creativity serves transcendent purpose, the results exceed anything we thought possible. But the true genius of Angkor Wat's design reveals itself when you understand how it functions as both architectural space and spiritual journey. The temple doesn't just contain sacred art. It is sacred art, designed so that the physical act of walking through its galleries creates a transformative psychological experience. Entering from the West, pilgrims first encounter scenes of worldly conflict and divine intervention. As they move deeper into the complex, the imagery gradually shifts toward more abstract cosmic themes. By the time they reach the central sanctuary, they have been psychologically prepared to encounter the divine presence directly. The temple literally guides consciousness from ordinary awareness toward enlightened perception through the careful orchestration of architectural space, sculptural imagery, and ritual movement. The construction of Angkor Wat took approximately 30 years, spanning most of Suryavarman VII's reign. But toward the end of the project, something extraordinary happened that reveals the true measure of what had been accomplished. Neighboring kingdoms, including traditional enemies of the Khmer Empire, began sending craftsmen and materials as gifts for the temple's completion, not because they were conquered or intimidated, but because they recognized that something unprecedented was being created, something that belonged not just to the Khmer people, but to all humanity. Even Buddhist kingdoms contributed to this Hindu temple, because they understood that Angkor Wat transcended sectarian boundaries. It was a monument to the human capacity for divine achievement itself. When the temple was finally completed and consecrated, the ceremonies lasted for days. Priests came from across Southeast Asia to participate in rituals that formally invited Vishnu to inhabit his new earthly dwelling. The air itself seemed to vibrate with spiritual energy as thousands of voices chanted in perfect unison. And then, at the moment of final consecration, something magical occurred that witnesses described as proof of the temple's authentic spiritual power. As the golden statue of Vishnu was installed in the central sanctuary, the first rays of dawnlight struck the central tower, and for a brief moment, the entire complex seemed to glow from within, as if illuminated by divine fire. Angkor Wat wasn't just completed on that day. It was spiritually awakened, transformed from magnificent architecture into a living temple where heaven and earth intersect. As you prepare for sleep tonight, let your mind drift through the sublime galleries of Angkor Wat. Picture yourself walking slowly through corridors where every stone whispers ancient prayers, where every carved figure seems to move in the flickering light of oil lamps, where the very air carries the fragrance of incense and the distant echo of sacred chants. Feel the cool stone beneath your feet as you climb toward the central tower, each step lifting you not just physically but spiritually, until you stand at the exact center of the cosmic mandala, surrounded by the infinite compassion of divine presence itself. In Chapter 6, we'll explore how Suryavarman VII's successor, the great Jayavarman VII, transformed the Khmer Empire's spiritual vision from Hindu devotion to Buddhist compassion, creating Angkor Thom and the mysterious Bayon Temple with its hundreds of smiling faces watching over the jungle for eternity. Sweet dreams await in the shadow of towers that touch both earth and heaven. What if the most mysterious smiles in human history were carved not by human hands, but by enlightened compassion itself, taking physical form? Dear dreamers, tonight we witness the most profound transformation in Khmer civilization's spiritual evolution. A moment when an entire empire shifted from worshipping the cosmic order to embodying infinite compassion, creating monuments that would smile serenely across centuries of change. This is the story of Jayavarman VII, the Buddhist king, whose revolutionary vision gave birth to Angkor Wat and the enigmatic Bayon Temple, where 216 stone faces watch over the jungle, with expressions of such perfect peace that they seem to breathe with eternal life. Picture yourself in the year 1181 A.D., standing at the gates of a city that doesn't yet exist. The great Angkor Wat gleams in the distance, its Hindu towers reaching toward the sky with mathematical precision. But the man walking beside you envisions something entirely different, something that will transform stone into living compassion. Jayavarman VII has just ascended to the throne, but he brings with him a spiritual revolution that will reshape not just architecture, but the very soul of Khmer civilization. He doesn't see himself as a god-king demanding worship. He sees himself as a bodhisattva, a being dedicated to the liberation of all sentient creatures from suffering. And from this vision of universal compassion, he will create the most emotionally powerful architectural complex the world has ever known. Here's what 94% of visitors to the Bayon don't understand about those famous smiling faces. They're not portraits of Jayavarman VII, as many guidebooks claim. They're representations of Avalokiteshvara, the bodhisattva of infinite compassion, whose presence transforms every stone tower into a beacon of spiritual refuge for all beings. Don't scroll past this revelation, because I'm about to explain how these carved smiles contain a psychological technology so advanced that modern neuroscience is only beginning to understand its effects on human consciousness. The construction of Angkor Wat began with a vision that defied everything the Khmer had built before. Instead of a single temple complex dedicated to cosmic order, Jayavarman VII planned an entire sacred city where every street, every building, every gateway would serve the goal of reducing suffering and increasing compassion throughout his empire. The city walls stretch for 12 kilometers, enclosing an area of 9 square kilometers. But these aren't just defensive fortifications. They're symbolic barriers protecting a realm where Buddhist principles govern every aspect of human interaction. At each of the city's 4 gates stands a magnificent causeway lined with 54 stone figures on each side. These aren't just decorative sculptures. They represent the cosmic struggle between good and evil from Hindu mythology, but reimagined through Buddhist understanding. The demons and gods work together to churn the ocean of consciousness, seeking not divine nectar for themselves, but enlightenment that can be shared with all beings. But the true masterpiece, waiting at the heart of Angkor Wat, would challenge every assumption about what temple architecture could achieve. Stay with me, because what I'm about to describe about the Bayon's construction will reveal why this temple has been called the most mysterious building on Earth. The Bayon rises from the exact center of Angkor Wat like a stone mountain inhabited by living spirits. But unlike the precise geometric symmetry of Angkor Wat, the Bayon seems to grow organically from the earth itself, its 54 towers arranged in seemingly random patterns that somehow achieve perfect visual harmony. This apparent randomness is actually the result of the most sophisticated architectural psychology ever attempted. Each tower is positioned so that no matter where you stand within the temple complex, you are always within sight of multiple smiling faces, creating the sensation that you are being watched over by benevolent, protective spirits. The psychological effect is immediate and profound. Visitors report feeling an inexplicable sense of peace and safety as soon as they enter the Bayon's galleries, as if they have stepped into a realm where suffering simply cannot exist. Can you imagine the spiritual confidence required to attempt something so ambitious? to believe that carved stone could be transformed into active compassion through the power of enlightened intention. Here's the detail that will give you chills about how these faces were actually created. Each one was carved by master sculptors working in deep meditative states, following traditional Buddhist practices for generating loving kindness toward all beings. The carvers weren't just following artistic techniques. They were channeling actual compassion into the stone itself. The result is faces that seem to radiate emotional warmth, even after 800 years of exposure to tropical weather. Faces that appear to shift expression subtly as lighting changes throughout the day. Faces that somehow convey both infinite patience and active engagement with the viewer's spiritual needs. Keep listening, because I'm about to reveal the hidden spiritual technology built into the Bayon's relief sculptures that most art historians completely miss. The Bayon's walls contain over 1,200 square meters of relief carvings, but these aren't mythological scenes like those at Angkor Wat. These are depictions of ordinary Khmer daily life, elevated to the level of sacred art. Fishermen casting nets, farmers harvesting rice, merchants trading goods, children playing games. But here's the revolutionary insight embedded in these carvings. By depicting everyday activities with the same artistic reverence traditionally reserved for divine subjects, Jayavarman VII was making a profound theological statement: that enlightened compassion finds the sacred within, the mundane, that every human activity becomes a form of prayer when performed with loving awareness. The message carved into every stone surface is clear. You don't need to be a king or a priest to participate in the divine life. The path to enlightenment runs through ordinary compassion toward ordinary people, in ordinary circumstances. This is exactly what mystic bedtime stories loves about Buddhist civilization at its finest. The recognition that spiritual achievement isn't about escaping the world, but about transforming our relationship with it through the cultivation of universal love. But the Bayon's most extraordinary feature isn't visible in any single architectural element. It's the way the entire complex functions as a three-dimensional mandala, designed to induce specific meditative states in visitors as they move through its spaces. The temple has 3 concentric levels, each one representing a different stage of spiritual development. The outer galleries show worldly concerns and conflicts. The middle level depicts the harmony that emerges when Buddhist principles guide human society. The inner sanctuary reveals the ultimate reality of infinite compassion that underlies all existence. Walking through the Bayon isn't just sightseeing. It's a carefully orchestrated journey from ordinary consciousness toward enlightened awareness, with each carved face serving as a spiritual guide encouraging the visitor forward on their path. Under Jayavarman, the 7th's Buddhist kingship, the Khmer Empire experienced a remarkable transformation. Hospitals and schools were built throughout the kingdom. Trade became guided by principles of fair exchange rather than pure profit. Even military campaigns were conducted with unusual restraint, focusing on protecting populations rather than conquering territory. The king himself lived simply, dedicating the wealth that previous rulers had spent on personal luxury to public works projects that directly improved the lives of ordinary people. His inscriptions speak not of his own glory, but of his aspiration that all beings might be free from suffering. This wasn't just political idealism. It was enlightened statecraft, the practical application of Buddhist compassion to the challenges of governing a complex multicultural empire. But perhaps the most moving testimony to Jayavarman VII's spiritual sincerity lies in the temple he built for his mother, the Preah Khan. Here, Buddhist and Hindu deities share the same sacred space, reflecting his understanding that ultimate reality transcends sectarian boundaries. All genuine spiritual traditions point toward the same goal, the cultivation of wisdom and compassion. The Bayon's smiling faces embody this inclusive vision perfectly. They welcome all beings regardless of their religious background, their social status, their personal struggles. Their message is simple, but revolutionary. You are seen. You are valued. You are worthy of infinite compassion exactly as you are. As construction of Angkor Wat neared completion, something unprecedented happened that reveals the true power of Jayavarman VII's compassionate vision. Neighboring kingdoms that had been traditional enemies began sending diplomatic missions not to negotiate treaties, but simply to experience the spiritual atmosphere that had been created within the sacred city. Visitors reported that spending time in the presence of the Bayans' smiling faces produced lasting changes in their own capacity for patience and kindness. The temple wasn't just inspiring people to be more compassionate. It was actually making them more compassionate through some mysterious process that modern psychology is only beginning to understand. As you drift toward sleep tonight, let those ancient smiles watch over your dreams with infinite patience and boundless love. Picture yourself walking slowly through the Bayan's mysterious galleries, feeling the stone faces following your movement with expressions of such perfect acceptance that all anxiety dissolves into profound peace. Feel the warm, tropical breeze carrying the scent of frangipani flowers through corridors where enlightened compassion has taken architectural form. Sense the presence of protective spirits carved from living rock, their eternal vigil ensuring that no genuine seeker of peace will ever walk alone. Next, we'll explore the rich tapestry of daily life that flourished under Buddhist Khmer rule, from the elegant grace of Apsara dancers to the profound scholarly traditions that made Angkor a center of learning for all Southeast Asia. What if the most magnificent temples in history were just the visible expression of a civilization that had learned to make every moment of daily life a form of sacred art? Now, we step away from the grand monuments and royal ceremonies to discover something equally extraordinary: the everyday life of a people who transformed ordinary existence into continuous spiritual practice. This is the story of how Khmer civilization created a culture so refined, so deeply integrated with spiritual wisdom, that even the simplest daily activities became expressions of cosmic harmony. Picture yourself awakening before dawn, in the heart of Angkor during its golden age. The first sound you hear isn't an alarm clock, but the soft chanting of monks walking through the streets, their voices weaving together in melodious prayers that seem to make the very air vibrate with peace. The sky lightens gradually, revealing not chaos or hurry, but a community beginning its day in perfect rhythm with the natural world. This isn't just daily routine. This is life lived as continuous meditation, where every action serves both practical necessity and spiritual development. Step outside your traditional wooden house, built on stilts, and feel the cool morning breeze carrying the fragrance of lotus flowers from the sacred berets. Around you, the city awakens with a gentleness that speaks of a civilization that has learned to honor both human needs and divine principles in everything it does. Can you imagine living in a society where beauty and spirituality weren't luxuries reserved for special occasions? but the foundation of how every person, regardless of social position, approached their daily tasks. The markets of Angkor open as the sun rises, but these aren't just commercial spaces. They're social temples where the entire community gathers to share not only goods and services, but stories, wisdom, and the quiet joy of human connection. Vendors arrange their fruits and vegetables in patterns that echo the geometric mandalas carved on temple walls. Even commerce becomes a form of sacred art. Listen to the gentle haggling between buyers and sellers. There's no aggressive competition here, no desperate scrambling for advantage. Trade is conducted according to Buddhist principles of right livelihood, where fair exchange benefits everyone involved. The goal isn't maximum profit, but sustainable prosperity that can be shared throughout the community. Stay with me, because I'm about to describe the artistic traditions that made Khmer culture legendary throughout Southeast Asia and continue to inspire people around the world today. As the day progresses, you begin to notice something extraordinary about Khmer society. Art isn't something that happens in special places by special people. Art is woven into the fabric of ordinary life so completely that the distinction between artistic expression and practical activity simply doesn't exist. Watch the rice farmers working in the flooded paddies. Their movements follow rhythms passed down through generations, but these aren't just efficient work techniques. They're choreographed prayers, physical meditations that honor both the earth that provides sustenance and the cosmic forces that govern the cycles of planting and harvest. The women weaving silk in their homes aren't just creating textiles. They're participating in a spiritual tradition that sees each thread as representing the interconnectedness of all existence. The patterns they create tell stories from Hindu and Buddhist mythology, but more than that, they encode spiritual teachings that will continue to educate and inspire long after the original weavers have passed away. Even the children playing in the streets move with a grace that reveals how deeply artistic sensitivity has penetrated Khmer culture. Their games often mimic the classical dance forms they see performed at temple festivals, creating an unbroken chain of cultural transmission that ensures artistic traditions remain alive and evolving from generation to generation. Keep listening, because what I'm about to describe about Apsara dancing will reveal why this art form was considered a direct form of communication with the divine realm itself. As evening approaches, the most magical transformation of Khmer daily life begins to unfold. In courtyards throughout Angkor, young women gather to practice the sacred art of Apsara dance, their movements so fluid and precise that they seem to be translating celestial music into visible form. But Apsara dancing isn't entertainment in the modern sense. It's active prayer, a physical discipline that transforms both performer and audience by recreating the cosmic dances that Hindu mythology describes as maintaining the balance of the universe itself. Watch how each gesture carries multiple layers of meaning. A simple movement of the hand might simultaneously represent a blooming lotus flower, the flow of divine grace, and the opening of the human heart to compassion. The dancers aren't just performing choreographed steps. They're embodying spiritual principles so completely that their bodies become living temples. The music accompanying these dances creates soundscapes that seem to open doorways between the physical and spiritual worlds. Ancient instruments, including the haunting tones of wooden xylophones and the rhythmic pulse of traditional drums, produce harmonies that induce meditative states in everyone within hearing distance. This is exactly what mystic bedtime stories, finds most beautiful about Khmer civilization at its peak: the understanding that artistic excellence and spiritual development are inseparable aspects of human flourishing. But perhaps the most remarkable aspect of Khmer cultural life was the way Hindu and Buddhist traditions blended together without conflict or contradiction. In temple courtyards, you might witness Hindu ceremonies in the morning and Buddhist meditation sessions in the evening, often with the same people, participating in both with complete sincerity. This wasn't religious confusion or syncretism. It was sophisticated spiritual understanding that recognized how different wisdom traditions could complement and enrich each other when approached with genuine humility and openness. Khmer scholars developed philosophical systems that integrated Hindu cosmology with Buddhist psychology, creating intellectual frameworks that influenced spiritual thinking throughout Southeast Asia for centuries. Their libraries contained texts in Sanskrit, Pali, and Khmer that preserved ancient wisdom while contributing original insights that advanced human understanding of consciousness and reality. The monasteries served not just as centers of religious practice, but as universities where students from across the known world came to study mathematics, astronomy, medicine, and philosophy. The same minds that calculated the precise alignments of Angkor Wat also developed medical techniques and agricultural innovations that improved life for countless people. During the great festival seasons, all these individual threads of Khmer cultural life wove together into community celebrations that engaged every sense and every level of human experience. The entire population of Angkor would participate in elaborate ceremonies that combined religious devotion, artistic performance, intellectual discourse, and pure, joyful celebration. Imagine processions winding through the temple complexes, carrying offerings of flowers, incense, and beautifully prepared foods toward the sacred sanctuaries. The air fills with the sounds of hundreds of voices chanting in perfect unison, while Apsara dancers move like living sculptures through corridors lined with stone carvings that seem to dance in response. These weren't just religious observances. They were expressions of a society that had learned to make celebration itself a form of spiritual practice, where individual joy contributed to collective harmony, and where community happiness became an offering to the divine forces that sustained all existence. But even in quieter moments, Khmer daily life maintained its connection to sacred principles. Family meals were prepared and shared with the same attention to beauty and harmony that characterized temple rituals. Conversations between friends carried the gentle wisdom of Buddhist compassion and Hindu cosmic understanding. Children grew up surrounded by artistic beauty and spiritual teachings, so completely integrated into ordinary experience that developing both creative sensitivity and ethical wisdom felt as natural as learning to walk or speak. As night falls over ancient Angkor, the day's activities gradually settle into peaceful conclusion. Oil lamps flicker in windows throughout the city, creating patterns of warm light that mirror the star configurations carved on temple ceilings. The sounds of evening prayers drift through the tropical air, carrying with them the accumulated blessings of a community that has spent another day transforming ordinary existence into continuous sacred practice. As you prepare for sleep tonight, let the gentle rhythms of Khmer daily life carry your dreams toward the most peaceful rest. Picture yourself walking slowly through temple courtyards where Apsara dancers move like living prayers, their silk costumes rustling softly in the evening breeze. Feel the warm stone beneath your feet, still holding the day's sunshine as you pass between galleries where ancient carvings seem to whisper stories of wisdom and compassion. Breathe in the fragrance of incense and tropical flowers, allowing these sacred scents to guide your consciousness toward the deep tranquility that comes when human life aligns perfectly with cosmic harmony. Next, we'll witness the shadow beginning to fall across this golden civilization as internal conflicts and external pressures begin to test the foundations of Khmer greatness. But even in decline, the spiritual achievements of this remarkable culture would continue to inspire and guide human consciousness toward higher possibilities. Rest peacefully in the embrace of a civilization that proved human society could become a living work of art when guided by wisdom, compassion, and dedication to beauty in all its forms. What if the greatest civilizations don't simply collapse, but slowly fade like sunset over ancient temples, their glory dimming so gradually that those living within them barely notice until the darkness has already begun? We will witness the most melancholy chapter in our story as the golden age of the Khmer Empire begins its slow transformation from paradise into memory. This isn't a tale of sudden catastrophe, but something far more poignant: the gradual unraveling of a civilization that had achieved near perfection. This is the story of how shadows crept across Angkor, and how even the most enlightened societies must eventually face the impermanence that governs all earthly things. Picture yourself standing in the same temple courtyard where, just a generation ago, hundreds of Apsara dancers moved like living prayers under starlit skies. The stone carvings remain as beautiful as ever. The architecture still inspires awe, but something subtle has shifted in the atmosphere. The crowds are smaller now, the festivals less frequent. The voices of evening prayers carry a note of uncertainty that wasn't there before. This is Angkor in the late 13th century, still magnificent, still functioning, but no longer growing, no longer reaching toward ever greater heights of spiritual and artistic achievement. The empire that once seemed eternal has begun its long, slow journey toward twilight. The first shadows didn't fall from outside invasions or natural disasters. They grew from within, from the very success that had made the Khmer Empire so extraordinary. By the reign of Jayavarman VIII in the mid-13th century, the hydraulic system that had sustained Angkor for centuries was beginning to strain under its own complexity. The network of canals, reservoirs, and irrigation channels that had once seemed like proof of divine favor now required constant maintenance by thousands of workers. Every drought stressed the system further. Every flood damaged crucial infrastructure. But here's the tragic irony that makes this decline so heartbreaking to contemplate. The Khmer possessed all the technical knowledge needed to maintain their hydraulic paradise. What they began to lose was something more precious: the unified spiritual vision that had originally motivated such massive collective efforts. Can you imagine the weight of responsibility that fell on each generation of Khmer leaders, inheriting not just political power, but stewardship of the most sophisticated civilization on Earth, knowing that any failure on their part would begin the unraveling of achievements that had taken centuries to create? The religious transformation that began under Jayavarman VII, while spiritually beautiful, created unexpected challenges for imperial unity. As Buddhism spread throughout the empire, it brought with it a philosophical emphasis on non-attachment and the transitory nature of all earthly achievements. This wisdom, so valuable for individual, spiritual development, began to undermine the cosmic confidence that had driven previous generations to attempt impossible projects like Angkor Wat. Buddhist philosophy taught that all constructed things must eventually decay, that suffering arises from clinging to impermanent forms, that true peace comes from releasing attachment to worldly success. These teachings brought profound psychological and spiritual benefits to countless individuals, but they also made it harder to maintain the collective determination needed for massive public works projects. Stay with me, because what I'm about to describe about the rising threat from the West will reveal how external pressures combined with internal changes to accelerate Angkor's decline. While the Khmer Empire was experiencing this gradual internal transformation, new powers were rising in the regions that would become modern Thailand. The Thai kingdoms of Sukhothai and later Ayutthaya weren't just political rivals. They represented a different model of Southeast Asian civilization, one that was more militaristic, more centralized, and more aggressively expansionist than the spiritually focused Khmer approach. The Thai kingdoms looked at Angkor's wealth and sophistication with a mixture of admiration and envy. They had learned from Khmer achievements in hydraulic engineering, temple architecture, and administrative organization, but they applied these lessons in service of more focused military objectives. The contrast couldn't have been more stark. While Khmer rulers continued to dedicate enormous resources to building temples and maintaining spiritual practices, Thai kings concentrated on building armies and fortifying strategic positions. While Angkor's scholars debated Buddhist philosophy and Hindu cosmology, Thai strategists studied the art of war. The first serious Thai raids into Khmer territory began in the early 14th century, but these weren't just military campaigns. They were systematic attempts to capture and relocate the skilled craftsmen, engineers, and scholars who had made Angkor great. The Thais understood that Khmer civilization's true strength lay not in its armies, but in its accumulated knowledge and artistic traditions. Keep listening, because the way these conflicts unfolded reveals something profound about how civilizations actually rise and fall, and why military conquest often represents the transfer of cultural achievement rather than its destruction. The siege of Angkor in 1431 by forces from Ayutthaya marked the symbolic end of the Khmer Empire's golden age, but the reality was far more complex than a simple military defeat. Many Khmer nobles, artisans, and priests had already begun relocating to safer regions, taking with them the knowledge and traditions that had made Angkor extraordinary. The Thai victory was as much about cultural absorption as political conquest. The victors immediately began studying and copying Khmer architectural techniques, administrative methods, and artistic traditions. They invited Khmer scholars to their courts, adopted Khmer religious practices, and even claimed legitimacy by marrying into Khmer royal families. In many ways, the fall of Angkor represented not the end of Khmer civilization, but its transformation and dispersal throughout Southeast Asia. The seeds planted by centuries of Khmer achievement would continue to grow in new soil, inspiring temples, artistic traditions, and spiritual practices across the entire region. But for those who remained in Angkor as the great capital slowly emptied, the experience must have been heartbreaking beyond words. Picture the last court ceremonies held in temples designed for thousands of participants, now attended by only a few dozen people. Imagine the silence settling over courtyards that had once echoed with music and laughter. Feel the weight of walking through galleries where magnificent carvings still told their eternal stories to fewer and fewer viewers each passing year. This is exactly what makes this chapter so poignant for those of us at Mystic Bedtime Stories. We're witnessing not just political change, but the slow fading of a dream that had sustained human imagination for over 600 years. The hydraulic system that had been the foundation of Angkor's prosperity began to fail, not from any single catastrophic event, but from the gradual accumulation of small problems that could no longer be addressed by a shrinking population with diminishing resources. Canals silted up without sufficient labor to clear them. Reservoir walls developed leaks that went unrepaired. The precise coordination between different parts of the system broke down as communities became isolated from each other by insecurity and declining trade. Most tragically, the institutional knowledge needed to maintain such a complex system began to disappear as master engineers and hydraulic specialists either fled to safer regions or passed away without being able to fully train their successors. Within a few decades, the landscape that had once been a green paradise sustained by human ingenuity began to revert to its natural state. Rice paddies became swamps. Canals became streams following their original courses. The cosmic mandala that had been imposed on the land through centuries of careful engineering slowly dissolved back into jungle. If this story of impermanence and change touches something deep within your heart, knowing that even our greatest achievements must eventually transform into something else, because we're learning that understanding impermanence can actually deepen our appreciation for beauty rather than diminishing it. But perhaps the most moving aspect of Angkor's decline was how gradually and peacefully it occurred. There were no dramatic battles fought within the temple complexes themselves, no deliberate destruction of the magnificent architecture that had taken centuries to create. The great monuments were simply, slowly, gently abandoned to the embrace of the tropical forest. Vines began to grow over carved reliefs. Tree roots slowly separated stone blocks that had been fitted together with mathematical precision. Moss covered the faces of stone deities, giving them expressions of even deeper serenity than their original carvers had achieved. The jungle didn't destroy Angkor. It adopted it, transforming human achievement into something that was simultaneously natural and artificial, ancient and eternal, magnificent and mysterious. By the late 15th century, only a few hundred people remained to maintain the core religious functions at Angkor Wat itself. The vast city that had once housed over 1 million people had become a pilgrimage site, visited by small groups of monks and devotees who came to meditate in the shadow of achievements their ancestors had created, but which they could no longer fully comprehend. The great libraries were abandoned, their palm leaf manuscripts gradually deteriorating in the humid tropical climate. The schools of sculpture and architecture closed, as there was no longer sufficient demand for such specialized knowledge. The institutional memory of how to create such marvels slowly faded into legend. As you prepare for sleep tonight, let the gentle melancholy of this transformation carry your dreams toward peaceful acceptance of all change and loss. Picture moonlight filtering through ancient galleries where carved apsaras dance eternally in stone, their beauty undiminished by the silence that now surrounds them. Feel the soft whisper of wind through abandoned courtyards where incense once carried prayers toward the heavens, now carrying only the fragrance of wildflowers that bloom between broken stones. Sense the profound peace that settles over human achievements when they are finally released from the burden of serving practical purposes and become pure expressions of eternal beauty. In Chapter 9, we'll explore how this abandoned paradise was gradually reclaimed by the forest, creating one of the most mysteriously beautiful archaeological sites in the world, where nature and human artistry achieved a synthesis more moving than either could create alone. What if the most beautiful art gallery in the world was one that nobody had visited for 400 years, where the curators were ancient trees and the lighting was filtered through centuries of accumulated leaves? This is the story of Angkor's forgotten centuries, when the jungle became both guardian and collaborator, preserving these monuments through gentle embrace, while transforming them into something that seems to exist halfway between the earthly and spiritual realms. Picture yourself as a bird, soaring high above what was once the greatest city in medieval Asia. Below you stretches an endless canopy of green, broken only by the occasional glimpse of weathered stone emerging from the forest floor like the bones of sleeping giants. The straight lines and geometric patterns that once proclaimed human mastery over nature have surrendered to the organic curves and random beauty of tropical growth. But this isn't destruction. This is the most patient and loving restoration project in history, carried out by master artists who work not with chisel and hammer, but with root and vine, with rain and time, with the slow insistence of life itself, seeking always to transform the artificial back toward the natural, without losing the beauty that human hands originally created. The great temples of Angkor didn't vanish when their human caretakers departed. They simply entered a different phase of their existence, becoming homes for new forms of sacred life. As decades passed into centuries, the jungle approached the abandoned temples with the tentative curiosity of a lover meeting a stranger who will become a lifelong companion. Tiny seeds, carried on the wind or in the digestive systems of birds, found purchase in the smallest cracks between stone blocks. These seeds asked nothing from the ancient builders, except the gift of a little soil accumulated in the shadows of their monuments. But from such humble beginnings, miracles slowly unfolded. The first small roots followed the natural mortar lines between stones, not seeking to destroy, but simply to find their way deeper into the earth that lay beneath human construction. As these roots grew thicker with each passing monsoon season, they began to lift and separate stone blocks with a gentleness that no human demolition could match. Can you imagine the patience required for such work? Years passing before the first visible sign of change. Decades before roots became thick enough to move stones that had remained motionless for centuries. Generations of trees living and dying before their efforts produced the breathtaking synthesis of architecture and botany that modern visitors find so mysteriously beautiful. The most magnificent example of this collaboration between human art and natural force emerged at the temple of Ta Prohm, where massive silk cotton trees and strangler figs grew not around the ancient buildings, but through them, their trunks rising from courtyards to spread canopies high above, galleries that had once been roofed with carefully fitted stones. Here, the boundary between construction and growth became impossible to distinguish. Tree trunks that seemed to be supporting collapsed walls were actually the cause of their collapse. But their embrace had become so complete that removing the trees would now cause the remaining walls to fall. The living and the built had achieved a synthesis so perfect that neither could exist without the other. Stay with me, because what I'm about to describe about the spiritual transformation of these forgotten temples will reveal why many modern visitors report experiencing something like religious awe, even when they have no connection to Hindu or Buddhist traditions. As the forest reclaimed the temples, it didn't simply cover them with vegetation. It transformed them into natural cathedrals, where filtered sunlight created ever-changing patterns of illumination that made carved reliefs seem to move and breathe with subtle life. Ancient sculptures of dancing apsaras appeared to sway in the shifting light and shadow created by leaves rustling hundreds of feet overhead. The acoustic properties of these jungle temples created soundscapes unlike anything that existed during their original use. Bird calls echoed through stone corridors, creating natural music that seemed to emanate from the walls themselves. The whisper of wind through leaves high above mixed with the drip of moisture from moss-covered stones to produce a constant, gentle symphony that induced meditative states in anyone who entered these sacred spaces. More mysteriously, the tropical climate began to add its own artistic contributions to the ancient carvings. Moisture and mineral deposits created new colors and textures on stone surfaces, while beneficial microorganisms formed patterns that seemed to complement rather than compete with the original sculptural designs. The jungle wasn't erasing human artistry. It was collaborating with it, adding new chapters to stories that the original artists had begun but never completed. Keep listening, because the way different temples responded to their forest embrace reveals something profound about the relationship between human creativity and natural processes. While Ta Prohm surrendered almost completely to botanical takeover, Angkor Wat's more elevated position and superior drainage allowed it to maintain much of its original architectural integrity even after centuries of abandonment. The jungle approached this masterpiece with apparent reverence, creating a living frame of towering trees around the temple's perimeter, while leaving the central structures largely untouched. It was as if the forest recognized that some human achievements deserved to be preserved in their original form, that certain expressions of divine inspiration should be allowed to continue speaking in their original architectural language even when their human interpreters have departed. The Great Causeway, leading to Angkor Wat, became a tunnel of green light, where ancient stone lions watched over pathways carpeted with fallen leaves that created natural mandalas more complex and beautiful than any human designer could conceive. Monkeys played among carvings of celestial dancers, while tropical birds nested in the stone lotus buds that crowned the temple's towers. At other sites, the collaboration between human art and natural growth produced effects that bordered on the surreal. Roots grew in perfect spirals around carved pillars, as if they had been trained by master gardeners to enhance rather than obscure the original sculptural details. Vines arranged themselves across wall surfaces in patterns that seemed to continue the narrative flow of ancient relief carvings. The most mysterious phenomenon occurred when certain trees began to grow in locations that suggested they were responding to the sacred geometry embedded in the original temple designs. Archaeological surveys have revealed that many of the largest trees in the Angkor complex are positioned at points that correspond to significant astronomical alignments or cosmic measurements encoded in the architecture. This is exactly what makes this chapter so magical for those of us at Mystic Bedtime Stories. We're witnessing evidence that the natural world possesses its own form of intelligence, its own aesthetic sensibility that can recognize and respond to human expressions of spiritual truth. But perhaps the most moving aspect of Angkor's forest period was how it created sanctuary for forms of life that existed nowhere else on Earth. The unique combination of ancient architecture and tropical growth produced ecological niches that supported species found only within the temple complexes. Rare orchids bloomed in the moisture-rich environment created by stone surfaces that collected and slowly released rainwater. Butterflies evolved color patterns that seemed designed to complement the weathered hues of ancient sandstone. Small mammals developed behaviors adapted to navigating the three-dimensional maze of roots, vines, and carved stone that characterized the reclaimed temples. The abandoned city became a living laboratory where evolution accelerated by the unique environmental conditions produced new forms of beauty that owed their existence to the meeting of human achievement and natural process. During the centuries when no human eyes witnessed these transformations, Angkor existed in a state of pure being, its beauty serving no purpose except the expression of its own inherent perfection. The temples continued to embody the cosmic principles that had guided their construction, but now they did so in conversation with natural forces that added their own voice to the eternal dialogue between earth and sky. As the centuries passed, local populations began to lose detailed memory of what Angkor had been during its golden age. The temples became the subjects of folk tales and legends that attributed their construction to gods, demons, or giants, rather than human hands. This mythologization actually served to protect the sites, as local people regarded them as sacred spaces, too powerful for casual disturbance. Occasional visitors, mostly Buddhist monks, making pilgrimages to sites that retained some religious significance, found themselves in the presence of monuments that seemed to exist outside ordinary time. Their reports, when they reached the outside world at all, described ruins so overgrown and mysterious that they sounded more like fairy tale descriptions than archaeological observations. The few travelers who did encounter these jungle temples reported experiences that bordered on the mystical. The combination of magnificent architecture and enveloping forest created an atmosphere that seemed to dissolve the boundaries between past and present, between human achievement and natural wonder, between the material world and whatever lies beyond it. These visitors often described feeling as though they had stumbled upon the ruins of a civilization that had achieved some form of enlightenment so complete that its people had simply transcended physical existence, leaving behind only these stone poems as evidence of their spiritual attainment. As you prepare for sleep tonight, let your imagination wander through these forgotten galleries where ancient art and living nature have achieved perfect synthesis. Picture yourself walking softly on paths carpeted with centuries of fallen leaves, while high above, cathedral ceilings of interwoven branches filter tropical sunlight into patterns of gold and green that dance across weathered stone faces still smiling with eternal serenity. Feel the presence of invisible guardians, neither fully human nor entirely natural, who have watched over these sacred spaces through all the forgotten centuries. Sense the profound peace that settles over achievements that no longer need to prove their worth to anyone, that exist simply as pure expressions of beauty offered to the cosmos itself. In our final chapter, we'll witness the miraculous rediscovery of this lost paradise by European explorers in the 19th century, and how Angkor emerged from its forest dream to take its place as one of humanity's most treasured heritage sites, inspiring new generations to dream of civilizations that could create harmony between human aspiration and natural wonder. Rest gently in the embrace of ancient trees whose roots have become the guardians of humanity's most beautiful dreams, preserving them through patience and love, for the day when the world would be ready to receive their gifts once again. Welcome, dear dreamers, to the final chapter of our mystical journey through the rise and rebirth of the Khmer Empire. Now, we witness one of history's most magical moments, when a lost paradise stepped out of legend back into reality, reminding the modern world that human beings are capable of creating beauty so profound it transcends the civilizations that birth it. This is the story of how Angkor Wat awakened from its forest dream to become not just Cambodia's treasure, but a gift to all humanity, proving that some achievements are truly immortal. Picture yourself in the humid jungle of Cambodia in January 1860, following a French naturalist named Henri Mahot as he pushes through dense vegetation, guided by local people who speak in hushed tones about ancient ruins hidden deep in the forest. The expedition has been traveling for days through terrain that seems untouched by human presence, when suddenly the jungle opens to reveal something that defies belief. Rising from the green canopy like a vision from another world, the towers of Angkor Wat pierce the morning mist with a majesty that stops the breath and opens the heart. Muhot stands transfixed, realizing he is the first European to witness what he will later describe as grander than anything left to us by Greece or Rome. But here's what makes this moment even more extraordinary. Angkor hadn't been truly lost. Local Khmer people had never forgotten its location or significance. Buddhist monks continued to maintain Angkor Wat as an active place of worship throughout the centuries of apparent abandonment. The temple had been lost only to the wider world's awareness, sleeping like a beautiful secret in the heart of the forest. This rediscovery represents something profound about how knowledge and beauty persist through time, waiting for moments when humanity is ready to recognize and appreciate achievements that previous generations had allowed to slip from collective memory. When Muhot's descriptions and drawings of Angkor Wat reached Europe, they created a sensation that went far beyond archaeological interest. Here was proof that medieval Asia had achieved architectural and artistic heights that rivaled anything in European civilization. Here was evidence that human creativity could produce monuments so magnificent they seemed to have been built by gods rather than mortal hands. Can you imagine the impact on Victorian minds that had been taught to believe that only European civilization could produce truly great art and architecture? Suddenly, they were confronted with photographs of temples that demonstrated sophisticated understanding of mathematics, astronomy, hydraulic engineering, and artistic composition that surpassed anything they had seen before. But the true miracle of Angkor's rediscovery lay not in what it revealed about the past, but in what it promised about human potential. If one civilization could create something so beautiful, so enduring, so spiritually uplifting, then perhaps humanity as a whole possessed capacities for achievement that had barely been explored. The restoration work that began in the early 20th century represented a new kind of collaboration between ancient wisdom and modern knowledge. French archaeologists and Cambodian craftsmen worked together to carefully remove centuries of jungle growth while preserving the magical synthesis of stone and living wood that had developed during the forest period. Stay with me, because what I'm about to describe about this restoration process reveals something beautiful about how the past and present can serve each other in creating more beauty than either could achieve alone. The restorers discovered that in many cases, the trees that had grown through the temples were actually helping to support structures that would have collapsed without their wooden framework. Rather than simply removing all vegetation, the restoration teams learned to work with the forest, preserving trees that served architectural functions while clearing away growth that threatened the monument's stability. This collaboration between human intention and natural process created restoration techniques that honored both the original builder's vision and the forest's centuries-long contribution to the site's development. Ancient stones were cleaned and repositioned, but always with respect for the organic changes that time and nature had contributed to their beauty. The result was not a return to some imagined original state, but the creation of something new, archaeological sites that preserved both human achievement and natural transformation, allowing visitors to experience the full historical journey that had brought these monuments from their golden age through their forest period to their modern renaissance. Keep listening, because the way Angkor Wat became a symbol of Cambodian identity reveals something profound about how cultural heritage can provide spiritual anchoring for communities that have experienced historical trauma. When Cambodia achieved independence from French colonial rule, Angkor Wat naturally became the central symbol of national identity. The temple appeared on the country's flag, on its currency, in its poetry and music. But this wasn't just political symbolism. It was spiritual reclamation, the recognition that Angkor Wat represented proof of Cambodian civilization's capacity for transcendent achievement. During the terrible years of the Khmer Rouge regime and civil war that followed, when so much of Cambodia's cultural heritage was deliberately destroyed, Angkor Wat stood as an indestructible reminder that the Cambodian people possessed an inherent capacity for creating beauty and wisdom that no political upheaval could permanently eliminate. Even when access to the temples was severely restricted, when scholars and tourists couldn't visit, when maintenance was impossible, the monuments themselves continued to embody the spiritual principles that had guided their construction over 800 years earlier. They remained proof that human consciousness could achieve states of harmony and understanding that transcended ordinary political and social conflicts. This is exactly what makes Angkor Wat so precious to all of us at Mystic Bedtime Stories. It demonstrates that certain human achievements become larger than the civilizations that create them, serving as permanent inspiration for all subsequent generations, regardless of their cultural background or historical circumstances. In 1992, UNESCO designated Angkor as a World Heritage Site, recognizing that these temples belong not just to Cambodia, but to all humanity. This designation marked the completion of Angkor's journey from local sacred site to universal symbol of human creative potential at its finest. But perhaps the most moving aspect of Angkor's modern renaissance has been watching how it continues to inspire new forms of artistic and spiritual achievement. Contemporary architects study its proportions and spatial relationships. Modern engineers marvel at its hydraulic innovations. Artists from around the world find in its carvings inspiration for new expressions of beauty and meaning. The temple complex has become a pilgrimage destination, not just for those seeking to understand ancient Khmer civilization, but for anyone hoping to experience firsthand what human beings can accomplish when their practical skills serve transcendent vision. If this story of rediscovery and renaissance fills your heart with hope about humanity's enduring capacity for beauty and wisdom, share a star in the comments below. Because we've witnessed together how the greatest human achievements never truly die, but wait patiently through dark periods to inspire new generations when the time is right. Modern visitors to Angkor Wat often report experiences that echo those of medieval pilgrims who came to worship in these sacred spaces. Standing in the presence of architecture that so perfectly embodies cosmic harmony, people of all backgrounds find themselves opening to states of consciousness that transcend ordinary concerns about nationality, religion, or historical period. The temple continues to serve its original purpose, creating conditions that allow human awareness to expand beyond its usual limitations and recognize its connection to something vastly larger and more beautiful than individual existence. During sunrise at Angkor Wat, when the first light of dawn illuminates the central towers and their reflection in the surrounding moat, visitors witness daily proof that some forms of beauty are so profound they seem to serve as direct communication between earthly consciousness and whatever divine intelligence guides the cosmos itself. These moments of recognition, multiplied across thousands of visitors from every corner of the earth, create a continuously renewed appreciation for what human civilization can achieve when it dedicates itself to serving beauty, wisdom, and spiritual truth rather than mere power or wealth. The restoration and preservation work continues today, carried out by international teams that include descendants of the original builders working alongside scholars and craftsmen from dozens of countries. This global collaboration represents a new form of the universal vision that originally inspired Angkor's construction. Just as the medieval Khmer Empire drew inspiration from Hindu and Buddhist traditions that originated far from Cambodia, modern efforts to preserve and understand Angkor draw upon expertise and resources from across the world, proving that transcendent achievements naturally inspire transcendent responses. As our journey through the entire story of the Khmer Empire draws to a close, let your mind rest in the profound peace that comes from understanding how human consciousness can create monuments to its own highest possibilities. We've witnessed together how practical skill guided by spiritual vision can produce results that continue to inspire and transform people centuries after their creators have returned to the earth. Picture yourself one final time walking slowly through the galleries of Angkor Wat as tropical twilight settles over the ancient stones. Feel the presence of all those who have walked these same paths across nearly 1,000 years. The original builders whose hands shaped every carved detail. The medieval pilgrims who came seeking divine blessings. The forest spirits who guarded these treasures through centuries of apparent abandonment. The modern visitors who continue to find in these stones confirmation of humanity's capacity for transcendence. Let the eternal smile of the Bayan stone faces bless your dreams with the recognition that compassion and wisdom are as enduring as the stone in which they're carved. Allow the perfect proportions of Angkor Wat to remind your sleeping consciousness that harmony and beauty are not accidents, but expressions of fundamental principles that govern the deepest structure of reality itself. As you drift into peaceful sleep, carry with you the knowledge that somewhere on our beautiful planet, ancient temples continue to reach toward the stars just as they have for centuries, proving that when human beings dedicate themselves to creating beauty in service of truth, they produce achievements that time cannot diminish and that serve as permanent gifts to the consciousness of our species. The story of the Khmer Empire reminds us that we too are capable of creating monuments to our highest aspirations. We too can transform practical necessity into spiritual practice. We too can build structures, whether of stone or consciousness, that serve not only our immediate needs, but the eternal human quest for meaning, beauty, and connection to the sacred dimensions of existence. Sweet dreams, dear dreamers, and may your rest be as peaceful as the eternal stillness that surrounds Angkor Wat in the hour before dawn, when the ancient stones seem to breathe with the quiet satisfaction of having served their sacred purpose perfectly for nearly 1,000 years. thank you for joining us on this mystical journey through the entire story of the Khmer Empire. Until we meet again in the realm of dreams and wonder, this is Mystic Bedtime Stories, wishing you the most beautiful rest